Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Carpo's channel. This will be video number 3,700 and something rather. I'm just guessing. I don't know. Many different subjects that I have to talk about, and therefore when I go to make a video, sometimes it's really hard to pin down exactly what I want to talk about. Therefore, sometimes I just don't make a video. In this case, I'm going to try to go through the several different ideas I had in my mind and then try to connect them and explain where I'm coming from. My first thought is about synchronicities and coincidence. Now, they are two different things. Now, coincidence by its mere nature means coinciding, or, having to do with, kind of like a coincidence would be you show up at an event and your friend who lives near you is at that event as well. You're like, oh, I didn't know you went to this class. Synchronicity would be something different, where, for example, you've been reading intensely about some obscure subject that nobody ever talks about, and then all of a sudden, randomly, something comes on, or someone else calls you out of the blue, or somehow you interact with that subject again, to where, yeah, it's similar to a coincidence, but it's a little more. I guess I should give you an example here. This bracelet I'm wearing, it's one of those bracelets that have been so popular over the past decade or so. Basically, they have everything you can imagine printed on them. And as I mentioned last week, I made a video explaining that my niece had passed away from an overdose at 23 years old recently. And it's been horrific for the family. It's been horrible for all of us. But whenever someone passes away, whenever someone dies too soon, you start asking yourself questions. You start placing blame. You start wondering, why the world is so brutal and why it happens. And at the same time, you look at all the people who die even younger. At least in my case, I can't help but always look at how much worse it is in some other cases. Someone who lost all of their children in a flood, there are a million different things, travesties that we can encounter in our lives. No one is any less or any more intense, depending on the individual and how we perceive it. How bad do we view it? How well can we cope? And I was surprisingly, bothered by this whole experience, of course, because I loved her, and she was part of my family. And so anyhow, back to the bracelet. I was walking to pick up my kids from school. I decided to leave early because I'd take some photos with my new lens. And then I went out and stopped at the cannabis shop. And then I had a choice to go left or right. And I figured, well, it'd be quicker to go right, but I'm going to go left and go up to the cemetery and maybe take some pictures of the cemetery, in which I caught a few good ones of some crows and things like that. And but anyhow, as I just ran across the street, walked up about 100 feet, a couple hundred feet, and I was noticing all the garbage in the fields. And just a couple weeks ago, I took a picture across the street of a syringe that was just sitting in the grass right across the street from my house, basically across the main highway, in this field where homeless people have stayed before. And I hate seeing needles. I've seen them in the drive-thru at Starbucks. I mean, heroin's a huge problem. And I'm not going to go into the details about addiction. That's not what this is about. But as I was walking up and looking at all the garbage, I noticed one of these little bracelets in the bushes, just kind of hanging there in all the junk. And usually I wouldn't pick something up because I don't know who owned it or how disgusting it is. But after I walked about 10 steps, I turned around and walked back and grabbed it. And I picked it up, and it says, "No addict seeking recovery need ever die." And I choked up for a minute. And, because basically Oregon apparently is one of the worst places to seek treatment, believe it or not. And many states just, basically throw you out of jail without giving a damn. Even when you're saying, I need help. She wanted to stay in jail, apparently. And until she could get placed in some other housing or something along that lines. And anyway, it happened. She died. And that's one of those things that we just have to continue on with our lives, right? And hope that we're not the next ones to go or somebody else we love. And that's what life's all about, is really every day acknowledging that you never know when your time will come. And sure, a lot of folks may say, well, she created her own problems. I'm not going to get into the problems with fentanyl on the market or whether addicts deserve to die, because I know a lot of people have their own opinions on these things. This isn't about that. What it is about is loss, and about how quickly things can change in your life. The second part here that I wanted to segue into, I guess, for lack of a better term, I hate that term, was about natural disasters and how much more prominent, for example, wildfires, floods, hurricanes have been over the past couple decades, and you can't deny that anymore. There's no question about argument about whether or not it's happening. Although people are still debating the whole global warming and climate change aspect, I'm not here to even talk about that. I'm here to talk about the potential for disaster in something what happened in California or in Colorado or various other places. There have been several wildfires. I believe there were like 45,000 if I'm not mistaken. And many of them are put out, and over the years we've learned that just because we stop wildfires doesn't mean we're doing the right thing, right? So we're trying everything in our power to stop wildfires, and then we find out that, oh man, well, we have to let this stuff burn. And so now we have prescribed burns, and places like, down in California, actually the most fire safe place is the national park down there. I believe it's not, darn it, now somebody's going to type it in the comments section. No, anyway, I'll think about it in a minute, but certain parks have been managed better than the land itself. And I bring this up because a lot of people are blaming, say, the electric company for not maintaining their lines, and yeah, they're partly to blame. Others are blaming the government for not cleaning up the forests or not managing it better, or as Trump said once, they need to rake their forests. But anyhow, I found that really everyone's to blame. We're all to blame, but also there is a drought going on, and these things have happened regularly over thousands of years. So California is going to continue to have these issues, especially if people are going to build in the hills. And that's so devastating, because you have a family who lives in a wonderful community like Paradise, and then overnight the whole community is burned down. I would like to say that I'm pretty impressed that only 85 people died, and from what I read, a majority of them were actually over 65, which doesn't make it any easier. But what it means is I know a lot of older folks are stubborn and they refuse to leave their homes, and also some it was difficult for them to get out because of conditions where they weren't able to move. But as far as the evacuation, as messed up as it was, and I've watched a lot about the Paradise Fire, because I'm really interested in these things. I want to know how they happen and why. I don't want to be caught in the middle of a wildfire. And I live in Vancouver, Washington, and I read earlier this is considered, it was number one on a list of the 10 safest places in the U.S. to avoid natural disasters. However, there's one natural disaster that we are overdue for, which is really the influence for this video when I started thinking about this. And I've grown up in the Portland area. I was born here. Over my whole life, I've only had one earthquake, maybe two. I think there were two small ones. One was a little bigger, but maybe, I can't even remember if it was a 6-pointer, 5-pointer. It was small, relatively. 4-pointer, who knows. But you could feel it, and it woke you up at night. And Portland and Seattle are two of the most fragile cities when it comes to a quake. Recent research over the past couple centuries has shown that, recent research over the past couple decades has shown that over the past several centuries there have been regular tsunamis and regular earthquakes here. They can see the floods by taking core samples. Basically it's like this. There have been a certain amount over the past 10,000 years, and by dividing it up they happen on average of something like 275 years. And the last one happened over 350 years ago. So we're way overdue. And these aren't earthquakes like California, where these plates are sliding back and forth. This is a subduction zone. The Cascadia subduction zone goes from northern Cali all the way up towards Canada. And when it goes under, the coast will drop 6 feet, And we'll get tsunamis bigger than Japan's, which were like, I think it was 33 feet in Japan. We're expecting to get 85-foot tsunamis, up to 85 feet here. And that doesn't include the 6-foot drop in elevation. Basically, the coast would be wiped out. But I'm not sitting here talking about disaster, and it may seem like I'm just skipping from addiction over to, over to fires, kids, and then over to this. But it all has to do with the fact that we never know what's going to happen next, and we have to be prepared for anything. And whether we lose an individual, somebody in our family or a friend, or whether we lose our whole neighborhood, life throws all kinds of shit at us. One of the craziest things is that the more passive we become, it seems like the easier life becomes, the more passive we become. We become less motivated to make change and to help others and to do great things when we're not affected by the world. And the truth is, so many of us are affected by the world that makes us want to speak out and do something about it. By the way, the bracelet that I mentioned, that's actually the Narcotics Anonymous saying. It's part of their quote, which is similar to the Serenity Prayer, which I remember from Alcoholics Anonymous, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I actually got that right, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Truth is, I've never actually said the prayer out loud because I could never get past the God part when I was younger. And maybe that's one of the other aspects to this, is as you get older, you don't have so many qualms or issues with believing that God may or may not exist. You have your own opinions, you believe what you believe. It's fine, nobody else cares. You start to realize that nobody else gives a shit. But that you do, and that it's not about finding a God or desperately hanging on to some truth that somebody else created. What I'm talking about is looking with a neutral mind at the world around you and seeing how amazingly interconnected it is. And by understanding that life and death are part of the process, that it's natural, that we're meant to die, that makes it a little bit easier to accept those who die around us. When we lose somebody who's a youth to addiction, that's very difficult. When we lose somebody who's a parent, say, my father was 42, he died, and I'm 43, almost 44, so when I hit that age, I was like, wow, my dad was this age when he died of cancer. That's difficult, but, who did I want to blame for that? I wanted to blame the military for Agent Orange, for the fact that he had carcinoma, and it was probably caused by that. But does that do any good? No. Does it do any good to blame the drug dealers for the overdose, or blame other parents, or enabling people? Those dirty words, enablers. Placing blame is the biggest waste of time. Same thing with the fires in California. Like I said, blame is only as good as getting results. If you turn over all those lines in California to some other company, they still have to do the same work and replace the same wires. It's the same problem of an aging infrastructure. And that's why I brought up the quake, because when that one hits, I might be stuck here and disconnected for a long period of time. And they are at regular intervals. They usually happen, sometimes they've gone for up to 400 years, and sometimes they've had a few within 100 years. But generally speaking, if a 9-pointer happened in this Cascadia subduction tomorrow, it would cut off all the routes and accesses from the coast to get over the coast range back here to Portland area. And from Portland, it would cut off almost all of the bridges except for the Selwood Bridge, which was retrofitted, and I believe another one, which is also might resist earthquakes. All of the road clearing equipment in Portland has been stashed under the I-5 bridge and the, I don't know if it's the Glen Jackson, but anyhow, they're both bridges that are expected to collapse in a major quake. And we would be disconnected from railways, from highways. It's really interesting that I consider Portland one of the safest places to live, yet it depends on what you're dying from, right? Depends on when you're living. You might live your whole life and never experience an earthquake. You might live your whole life and never experience a wildfire or a tornado or a hurricane, which I haven't even mentioned because I don't live in the South and I never would. Honestly, I could not live in a place like Florida and risk that idea of just being wiped off the face of the planet. We've got pretty calm weather here and I'm grateful for that, but we do have our own dangers. And beyond the earthquakes, heroin, fentanyl, killing people left and right out here. It's, I guess you could say that people make their choice. They make their bed and they lie in it, but it's easy to say that, but it's not as easy to understand it. It's even more difficult, like I said, to understand how people can be taken away without even them intervening in their own lives. Young kids who are taken away in floods or flash floods or unexpected freak hailstorm that hits somebody on the head. I mean, so many strange things happen in this world. If I were to give one message to take away from this, it would be really be grateful for what you have when you have it. Embrace your life. Be grateful for having the ones you love around you and having them give a shit about you if you have anyone who cares about you. And if you don't, make friends. I'm not just saying go out and make friends. I'm saying if you have that option in your life, try not to push people away because it's so important to keep the people we have in our lives who love us. My wife, without her in my life, I honestly don't know what I would even think about this world. I used to think I was pretty stable-minded and I understood and I could cope with loss and life and all the changes and philosophy, but she's my rock, my stability. She is my tether. She doesn't even realize it, but she's an amazing, amazing person, and I've been with her for almost 21 years, 21 years this year, and it's been an amazing time. We have 3 kids and a great home in a pretty safe place, maybe earthquake prone, but I just heard a rooster. I noticed one of my neighbors got a rooster the other day. But anyhow, I just wanted to, I guess, talk about that random string of subjects and, get that off my chest for what it's worth. Maybe I'll come back and I heard him again. Come back and make another video later. And so, thanks for listening. Talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Be well.